I am Charlotte, a 58-year-old widow from Boston. For 35 years, I stood beside Richard, watching him build his tech empire worth $65 million. We were partners in everything until cancer took him last spring. At his funeral, my son Andrew whispered words that pierced my heart. "Don't expect a dime from Dad's estate." I never imagined my own child could be so cruel, but the will reading would change everything. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever discovered someone's true colors when money was involved. I met Richard during my sophomore year at Boston University. He was a brilliant computer science major with ambitious dreams, while I studied business administration. Our connection was immediate. He talked about changing the world with technology, and I believed in him completely. We married right after graduation, setting up our first apartment in a tiny walk-up that barely fit our secondhand furniture. Richard started coding in our spare bedroom, while I took an entry-level marketing job to keep us afloat. Those early years were tough, but wonderful. We ate ramen noodles, counted pennies, and dreamed big. When Richard's first software application gained traction, we celebrated by splurging on Chinese takeout. I remember his eyes shining with excitement as he told me, "Charlotte, this is just the beginning. Everything I build will be for our family." Andrew was born 3 years into our marriage. I can still picture Richard holding him in the hospital, promising to give him everything we never had growing up. Emily arrived 4 years later, completing our family. Richard worked 80-hour weeks, and I juggled part-time work with raising our children. By the time Andrew started elementary school, Rich Tech Solutions was becoming a respected name in the industry. I put my own career aspirations on hold, focusing instead on creating the stable home our children needed and hosting the dinner parties that helped Richard forge crucial business connections. Your mother's social intelligence is worth more than any business degree, Richard would tell the children. She knows what people need before they do themselves. As the company grew, so did our lifestyle. We moved from our starter home to a beautiful colonial in Brookline, then, eventually, to the Newton estate, where I still live. The children attended private schools, we vacationed in Europe, and Richard's collection of luxury cars expanded with each successful year. I noticed changes in Andrew as he entered his teens. When his friends came over, he would showcase our home like a museum curator, emphasizing the value of everything. "Dad's watch costs more than most cars," he'd boast. It troubled me, but Richard assured me it was just adolescence showing off. Emily remained grounded despite our wealth. She volunteered at homeless shelters and chose a modest car when she turned 16, while Andrew demanded a BMW and acted entitled to every luxury. By the time Andrew entered business school, he spoke constantly about eventually taking over Rich Tech. Richard was cautiously supportive, but privately expressed concerns to me. "Andrew sees the company as a cash machine, not a legacy," he confided one night. "He doesn't understand what building something truly means." When Andrew married Stephanie 7 years ago, Richard and I had reservations. She came from a family that had lost their fortune, and her interest in our wealth seemed transparent. At their wedding, I overheard her telling a friend, "My days of budget shopping are finally over." As Richard's health began declining last year, I became his primary caregiver. We knew the cancer was aggressive, but he refused to slow down. "The company needs me," he'd insist, working from his home office between treatments. Our last family dinner together happened just 3 days before his heart attack. Andrew and Stephanie arrived late, barely acknowledging my efforts with the meal. The conversation turned tense when Richard mentioned revising some company policies. "Dad, you need to rest and let me handle things," Andrew said, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "Times are changing, and some of your approaches are outdated." Richard just looked at him thoughtfully and changed the subject. Later that night, he stayed up late in his study. When I brought him tea, he was reviewing documents with an intensity I hadn't seen in months. "Just making sure everything is in order," he said, squeezing my hand. "You've been my true partner every step of this journey, Charlotte. Never forget that." Those were the last meaningful words we shared before everything fell apart. The call came at 6:30 in the morning. Richard had collapsed in the bathroom. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was barely responsive. The paramedics worked frantically, but I could see in their eyes what they wouldn't say aloud. At the hospital, the doctor spoke those words that instantly divide your life into before and after. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Caldwell. We did everything we could." A massive heart attack, they said. The cancer had weakened him more than we realized. Emily arrived within the hour, her face crumpling when she saw me. We held each other, sharing our grief without words. Andrew and Stephanie appeared 3 hours later, both dressed impeccably, despite the emergency. "What about his advanced directives? The company needs leadership continuity," were Andrew's first words. Not, "I'm sorry," or "How are you holding up, Mom?" Just business, as though his father were a corporate matter to be handled. Planning the funeral became my focus. Richard had been well respected in both tech and philanthropic circles, so I expected a large turnout. What I didn't expect was Andrew questioning every decision. "Mom, that funeral home is overpriced. Dad would want us to be practical about expenses now." This from a son who thought nothing of spending thousands on designer suits. The service was beautiful, but surreal. Hundreds attended, including tech industry pioneers and the many employees whose careers Richard had fostered. I stood greeting mourners for hours, accepting condolences from people whose lives Richard had touched. During the reception at our home, I overheard Andrew speaking with Richard's CFO in the study. "I'll need full access to the accounts by Monday. My father always intended for me to step in immediately if anything happened." That night, after everyone left, I went to Richard's study to find his personal papers, only to discover the door unlocked and several folders missing from his desk. The family photo that normally sat on his bookshelf had been moved, and his computer was gone. The next morning, Emily found me sitting in Richard's chair, staring at the empty spot where his laptop should have been. "Mom, Andrew took Dad's computer last night. He said he needed to secure company information," she explained gently. "Is that okay?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Roger Henderson, Richard's attorney for over 20 years. "Charlotte, I'm calling about Richard's will. We should schedule the reading as soon as possible. There are matters that need immediate attention." His tone suggested something important, but he wouldn't elaborate further. "Just make sure you're there in person, Charlotte, and perhaps bring someone you trust for support." That same afternoon, I discovered Richard's credit cards in my wallet had been canceled. When I called the bank, they informed me that Andrew had contacted them as interim CEO and requested changes to the account access. Emily was furious when I told her. "He has no right. Dad's body isn't even cold yet." She offered to confront her brother, but I asked her to wait. The will reading was scheduled for Friday. 4 more days to endure this uncertainty. That evening, I received a text from Richard's executive assistant, Diane. "Mrs. Caldwell, I thought you should know Andrew has called a board meeting for tomorrow. He's presenting himself as the new CEO. I'm so sorry." The walls of the house Richard and I had shared for 20 years suddenly felt like they were closing in. Everything familiar now seemed temporary, as though my place in my own life was being erased. 6 days after Richard's funeral, Andrew and Stephanie arrived unannounced at my front door. Andrew was wearing one of Richard's watches, and Stephanie carried her designer purse like a trophy. "Mom, we need to discuss the estate," Andrew announced, walking past me into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. "There's paperwork that requires immediate attention." I led them to the living room, offering coffee, which they declined. Andrew pulled out a folder of documents and slid them across the coffee table. "These grant me temporary authority over Dad's assets until the will is executed. I need your signature," he stated flatly. "I'd prefer to wait and review everything with Roger after the will reading," I replied. Andrew's expression hardened. "Mom, this isn't a request. The company needs leadership now. Dad always intended for me to take over." When I again declined, his facade cracked. "Look, you need to understand the reality here. Don't expect a dime from Dad's $65 million estate. He built that company, not you." Stephanie, who had been scrolling through her phone, looked up with a smirk. "We're in charge now, Charlotte. You should start adjusting to your new circumstances." The casual cruelty in her tone left me speechless. These were family members who had sat at my dinner table countless times, who had accepted my gifts and hospitality for years. "I think you should leave." I finally managed my voice steadier than I felt. "Fine, but this isn't going away," Andrew snapped, gathering his papers. "The lawyers will contact you." After they left, I called Emily in tears. She arrived 20 minutes later, bringing comfort food and fierce loyalty. "They have no right to treat you this way, Mom. None." The following day, my key card to Richard's office building was deactivated. When I called to inquire, the receptionist awkwardly explained that Mr. Caldwell Jr. had ordered security changes. Then came the humiliation at Bristol Farms grocery store. My credit card was declined twice before the sympathetic cashier allowed me to leave with my groceries and settle the bill later. Back in my car, I discovered all joint accounts Richard and I had shared were frozen. Emily investigated and discovered Andrew had already filed paperwork with the State Business Registry, listing himself as CEO and primary shareholder of RichTech. He had somehow convinced the bank to freeze accounts pending a state resolution, effectively cutting off my access to funds. That evening, I received an anonymous call. "Mrs. Caldwell, this is someone from Richard's office. I can't say who. Andrew is meeting with Techron Industries tomorrow about selling the company. He's telling everyone it was Richard's last wish." I felt physically ill. Richard had repeatedly rejected acquisition offers from Techron, considering their business practices unethical. He would never want his life's work in their hands. For hours, I sat in Richard's study, surrounded by the books and mementos of our shared life, feeling utterly powerless. Then, around midnight, my old college friend, Patricia, called to check on me. As a retired judge, her perspective was exactly what I needed. "Charlotte, you've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for," she said firmly. "Richard knew that too. Don't let Andrew rewrite your story or Richard's legacy." Her words kindled something in me. Grief had clouded my thinking, but clarity was beginning to emerge. Richard wouldn't have left me vulnerable. He was too thorough, too careful for that. I just needed to find the evidence. The next morning, I began searching our home for anything Richard might have left to guide me. In our 35 years together, we had developed a kind of shorthand, small signals that spoke volumes. Richard always left clues when something was important. In his closet, I noticed his collection of cufflinks had been rearranged. The pair I had given him for our 30th anniversary was now prominently displayed, rather than tucked away in the back as usual. I examined the wooden box they came in and discovered a small key taped underneath. The key opened a hidden wall safe behind his favorite painting in the study, a safe I hadn't even known existed. Inside was a leather journal and a USB drive labeled simply for Charlotte. The journal contained entries from the past 5 years. Richard had documented his growing concerns about Andrew's character and business ethics. One passage particularly stood out. Andrew suggested cutting our research division today to boost short-term profits. When I explained that innovation is our future, he called my approach sentimental business. I fear he sees Rich Tech as merely an ATM, not a company with values and people who depend on us. Charlotte has always understood this better than Andrew ever will. Another entry from 3 months ago read, "Meeting with Margaret Wilson today. Changes to the trust structure are complete. Charlotte will be protected. Andrew won't be pleased, but he needs this lesson if he's ever to become the man I've hoped he would be." The USB drive contained copies of financial records, trust documents, and video recordings of Richard's private conversations with his attorneys. In the most recent video, dated just 2 weeks before his death, Richard looked directly into the camera. "Charlotte, if you're watching this, things have gone as I feared they might. Andrew has shown his true colors. Remember our conversation in Napa Valley on our anniversary? You've always been my true partner in life and in business. Everything I've built, we built together. The documents on this drive are your shield. Use them wisely." I remembered that anniversary conversation clearly. We'd discussed what would happen to the company after Richard's eventual retirement. He'd surprised me by suggesting I might take a more active role. "You understand people, Charlotte. That's what really builds a successful business." Armed with this new information, I contacted Roger Henderson and requested a private meeting before the official will reading. He agreed immediately. Roger's office was a sanctuary of old-world professionalism. When I showed him the USB drive and journal, he nodded gravely. "Richard came to see me 6 months ago with concerns about Andrew. He was very thorough in his preparations." "Did he change his will?" I asked directly. Roger's expression remained neutral. "I can't discuss the contents until the official reading, but I can tell you Richard was a man who valued loyalty and partnership above all else." That afternoon, Emily discovered through a former college classmate who now worked at Rich Tech that Andrew had already been removing company funds, transferring them to new accounts under his sole control. He had also been meeting with potential buyers, despite telling the board he was merely exploring strategic partnerships. Meanwhile, Patricia had connected me with a forensic accountant who specialized in family business disputes. "Document everything, Charlotte," she advised. "Every conversation, every text message, every unusual financial movement. The truth leaves trails." The night before the will reading, I received a call from Andrew. His voice was slightly slurred, suggesting he'd been drinking. "Mom, I hope you're not planning any drama tomorrow. Dad and I had an understanding about the company. It would be embarrassing for everyone if you contested what he wanted." "And what did he want, Andrew?" I asked quietly. "He wanted his life's work in capable hands, hands that understand modern business, not someone who just played hostess at dinner parties." After he hung up, I sat in Richard's study for hours, surrounded by the evidence of our shared life and his careful planning. For the first time since his death, I felt his presence guiding me. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would face it with the strength he had always seen in me. The conference room at Henderson Bateman and Associates was imposingly formal, with a massive mahogany table and leather chairs. I arrived 15 minutes early, with Emily and Patricia taking seats near Roger's position at the head of the table. Andrew and Stephanie entered at exactly 2 o'clock, followed by a sharp-looking attorney I didn't recognize. Andrew had chosen not to acknowledge me, but Stephanie made a point of looking around the room with an appraising eye. "Quite old-fashioned decor," she stage-whispered to Andrew. "We should recommend someone more modern when we review the company's legal representation." Roger cleared his throat and began the proceedings. "Thank you all for coming today. Before we begin the formal reading of Richard Caldwell's last will and testament, I must inform you that Richard made certain arrangements that require additional legal oversight." He gestured toward the door, where a distinguished older woman with silver hair and piercing eyes had entered. "This is Margaret Wilson, specializing in trust and estate law. She worked with Richard on certain aspects of his estate planning." Andrew frowned. "Why wasn't I informed about this? As Richard's son and business successor, I should have been consulted." Margaret smiled thinly. "Mr. Caldwell, your father was under no obligation to consult you about his private legal affairs. Shall we proceed?" Roger opened a sealed envelope and adjusted his reading glasses. The room fell silent as he began to read. "I, Richard James Caldwell, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils. To my beloved wife Charlotte, who built everything alongside me, and whose partnership made all my success possible, I entrust the majority of my estate and the future of my life's work." Andrew lunged forward. "What? There must be some mistake," Roger continued, reading his voice steady, despite the interruption. "To Charlotte Ann Caldwell, I bequeath the following 70% of all my personal assets, including our family home and all properties. Controlling interest, comprising 60% of voting shares in Rich Tech Solutions, Inc., and full authority as chairperson of the board, effective immediately upon my death." Stephanie's face had drained of color. Her perfectly manicured hand gripped Andrew's arm so tightly, her knuckles turned white. "To my daughter, Emily Susan Caldwell, I leave 15% of my personal assets and 15% of Rich Tech Solutions shares, to be held in trust until she completes her MBA or turns 35, whichever comes first." Emily gasped, softly beside me, squeezing my hand. We both knew she had recently been considering business school, something she had only discussed with her father. "To my son, Andrew Richard Caldwell, I leave 10% of my personal assets and 10% of Rich Tech Solutions in non-voting shares, contingent upon the following conditions. These assets will be held in trust, managed by Charlotte Caldwell and the Board of Trustees, until such time as Andrew demonstrates consistent ethical business judgment over a period of not less than 5 years. Andrew's attorney interrupted. "This is outrageous. Clearly, Mr. Caldwell was not of sound mind when making these decisions. My client was the designated successor to the company." Margaret Wilson removed a file from her briefcase. "We anticipated this response. Richard Caldwell underwent comprehensive psychological evaluation by 3 separate specialists before finalizing this will. All certified him completely competent. Additionally, we have video testimony explaining his decisions in his own words. Would you like to view that now?" "This is a setup," Andrew shouted, his composed facade completely shattered. "My father would never do this to me. He built that company for me to run." Roger continued reading, unfazed by the outburst. "I have made these decisions not out of malice, but out of love and responsibility. Charlotte has been instrumental in building Rich Tech from our first day together. Her intuition about people and ethical compass have guided my most successful decisions. The company's future will be secure in her hands. Furthermore, I have observed with great concern Andrew's approach to business and wealth. He has yet to understand that a company is more than its profit margin. It is a community of people, ideas, and values. It is my hope that this arrangement will give him time to develop the wisdom necessary to eventually share in leadership. Andrew stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. I'll contest this. No jury will believe my father wanted his secretary wife running a tech company. That's when I finally spoke, my voice quiet but firm. Your father left video testimony, Andrew. Would you like everyone here to watch him explain exactly why he made these decisions? Margaret nodded toward a laptop set up at the end of the table. We can play it right now. Andrew looked from Margaret to me, then to his lawyer, who gave a subtle headshake. Without another word, Andrew grabbed his briefcase and stormed out, Stephanie hurrying behind him. As the door slammed, Roger continued reading the private letter Richard had included with his will. His words washed over me like a healing balm. Charlotte, my truest love and partner, if you're hearing this, I've left you with burdens I never wanted you to carry alone. But I've also left you with everything you need to succeed. You've always been the heart of our family and the secret strength behind Rich Tech. Now it's time for everyone else to see what I've always known. Trust yourself as I have trusted you. All my love, Richard. For the first time since his death, I allowed myself to cry freely, not from grief alone, but from the profound recognition that Richard had truly seen me all along. The weeks following the will reading were a battlefield. As Roger had predicted, Andrew immediately filed to contest the will, claiming Richard had been unduly influenced during his illness. His legal team attempted to portray me as a manipulative widow who had taken advantage of a dying man. Stephanie wasted no time launching what Emily called a social media smear campaign, posting thinly veiled accusations about my character to her substantial following of social climbers and influencers. It's tragic when the elderly are manipulated by those closest to them, she wrote, garnering sympathetic comments from people who knew nothing about our family. Meanwhile, Andrew sent alarming emails to Richard's business partners, claiming the company was in disarray and suggesting they reconsider their relationships with Rich Tech until proper leadership was restored. Several called me directly concerned about the future of projects they had established with Richard. There were moments I questioned whether I could handle this fight. One night, after spending hours reviewing financial documents that revealed the extent of Andrew's preparatory maneuvering, I broke down completely. Emily found me surrounded by papers, sobbing in Richard's study. "Mom, you don't have to do this," she said gently. "We have enough to live comfortably. We could walk away." I looked up at our daughter, so much like Richard in her quiet integrity. "This isn't about money, Emily. It's about honoring what your father built and what he believed in." Andrew would dismantle it all for quick profit. The next morning, our forensic accountant delivered stunning news. Andrew had already emptied several company accounts before the will reading, transferring nearly $2 million to offshore accounts. This discovery became our counterstrike. With Margaret's guidance, we filed for an emergency injunction to prevent further asset movement and demanded a full accounting of Andrew's financial activities. Patricia connected me with Sophia Brennan, one of the top estate litigation attorneys in Massachusetts. "Charlotte Richard left you a roadmap," Sophia observed after reviewing our evidence. "He documented everything, almost as if he anticipated Andrew's every move. Indeed, Richard's journal contained entries predicting exactly how Andrew might attempt to seize control. He'd noted which board members might waver, which business partners Andrew might approach, and even anticipated the public relations angle Andrew would use. 10 days after filing our injunction, we faced the first major test, an emergency board meeting Andrew had called, ostensibly, to stabilize leadership during this family dispute. He clearly expected to walk into a room of allies, having spent days lobbying board members individually. Instead, he found me seated at the head of the table with Margaret and Sophia flanking me. I had spent the previous week personally meeting with each board member, sharing not only Richard's vision for the company's future, but also concrete evidence of Andrew's financial mismanagement. Gentlemen, ladies, I began when everyone was seated. I understand there are concerns about Richtech's stability during this transition. Let me assure you that while I am new to the role of chairperson, I am not new to this company's values or operations. I proceeded to outline a clear transition plan, complete with quarterly targets and innovation initiatives Richard and I had discussed during his illness. When questions arose about technical matters, I surprised everyone, perhaps myself most of all, by addressing them knowledgeably. Years of listening to Richard talk about his work of editing his presentations, of hosting dinners where business was discussed, had taught me far more than I realized. I wasn't a tech expert, but I understood Richtech's market position and culture intimately. By meeting's end, Andrew's attempt to undermine my leadership had backfired dramatically. His financial improprieties were now common knowledge among the board, and his facade as Richard's natural successor had crumbled. The defining moment came when Margaret presented Richard's video statement to the board. Richard, though visibly weakened by illness, spoke with characteristic clarity. I built Richtech on innovation and integrity. Charlotte has been my sounding board and moral compass since day one. She may not code, but she understands what matters most, that business is fundamentally about people. Trust her judgment, as I always have. 2 days later, the court rejected Andrew's petition to contest the will, citing overwhelming evidence of Richard's competence and clear intentions. The judge specifically noted the meticulous documentation